Good morning, everybody. I am Pam Myers with Pam Myers Social Media. Welcome to our weekly podcast of conversations with Jane C. Phillips. Today, because it's Veterans Day, we're going to talk to Jane about the effects of PTSD. And we know, right, everybody knows PTSD was brought to light because of the military, but it affects so many different occupations. So, good morning, Jane. How are you today?
I'm good. Um, so today, being Veterans Day, PTSD, there are a few people that don't know what that means. It means post-traumatic stress disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens and I'm not a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist, so you have to make that disclaimer. But what happens to us if especially in the military, our veterans have observed a whole ton of horrific things. They've observed death and all sorts of fashions, which we don't need to talk about specifics on that. But you can just imagine. And what happens is you watch the horrors of war, or just combat, or somebody that's a dear friend of yours in the military is no longer there because he was killed. Your body has a huge shock reaction when you see events that are, pretty horrific.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is, in my world, I've come to understand that when we've had a huge shock, it actually embeds an emotion into your physical system.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually alters your body. And when that happens, as you're going through life, those images that you can't get out of your mind because they're stored in there, whatever it was, is going to trigger reactions, and the way how it triggers reactions, so you feel awful and you can't function well, is you're either in your mind, the memory is replaying with all the trauma with it, and the other piece that happens is you have a chemical reaction in your physical body. So you get anxiety, you're afraid, you're back to the moment when that happened before.
Mm-hmm.
And so PTSD is really awful. And you can have PTSD from maybe one event, and that's easier for me and others to help remove it. But when you've had, 4 years in the military, you've probably had more than one event.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have a couple of women clients who weren't treated very well in the military. We won't go into details about that, but who have PTSD from their treatment in the military. And it wasn't related to war or watching someone get blown up.
Right.
And so what happens is, however you choose to get some help, if you have it, whether you have it from the military or you had one of those childhoods that you can't even talk about, or something later in life, there are ways to help you get through it so you can start to function better again. And so what I'm going to talk about is what I do, and also let you know that there's more than just talk therapy out there. And I don't disagree with having a therapist to talk about things, but if they don't have tools to remove the emotional component of what you went through, you end up reliving things and embedding it deeper.
Mm-hmm.
That's my experience with some of my clients that have tried talk therapy, and it hasn't worked because the therapist hasn't had alternate training besides the talk part.
Right.
So what I want to let people know, whether you're a veteran that has PTSD or somebody else, where it's been brought to light that that's what's going on, you're not able to function in certain situations. There are things we can do, and there are things that you could do personally. Sometimes you have to have a little help with somebody like me. So what happened to me in my career as a medical intuitive, and also as somebody who works with the paranormal things, if I'm working with somebody who has the post-traumatic stress disorder, one of the first things that I try and do is make sure they don't have any other energies on them. I call them possessions. It's often ghost type energies. And when somebody is in trauma of any way, we lower ourselves sort of to be a vibrational match to some of these energies that are floating around. So then that just enhances your feelings. Mm-hmm. So one of the first things that I do if somebody comes to me is we make sure, because not everybody has extra stuff on them, but we make sure that those energies are off. So you sort of have a clean slate. And the other thing that I have found, I became certified as an emotion code practitioner a few years ago in 2019. And because when we've had trauma, we don't want to talk about it again. Let's face it, it was bad enough the first time around, and probably the other 50 times we've looked at it.
Right.
Because it keeps replaying. So you don't want somebody like me saying, well, tell me about X. So what happens, the nice thing about the emotion code is you can say, I'm here because I'm having nightmares, or I can't be in a social situation, or if I'm in too many people in a crowd, you can frame that. And the energies that work with you, and each of us has guides and support systems, whether you believe it or not, will work with me to go into your subconscious library and find an emotion. The chart that I work with has 60. Obviously, there are more than 60 emotions out there. And find an emotion, because of how I can work at the chart and my dowsing. Find that emotion. Find an age when that emotion got really slammed into your system. Mm-hmm. And I don't have to have you review the situation. You're going to, if I'm right, if I've picked the right age and the emotion, you're going to say, oh, yeah, I know that one. And you don't have to talk about it again because the less said. And then when that particular emotion that got hit in you from that situation is removed, it's a little lighter. You're not going to be quite as triggered. And you might have 6 emotions for one event, or you might have 2, or you might have a series of events with different emotions. And sometimes in one session, you'll get enough relief that you don't need to do more. And sometimes with PTSD, that's certainly military, you've had probably lots and lots of situations. And so it might take longer. But the bottom line is there's hope, and there's a possibility besides just talk therapy. It doesn't mean that that's not what you're going to also do. Right. Or you may find somebody that does something different. There's something called neuro-linguistic programming, which I know about. I'm not called to work with it. There's work that I do that's guided imagery, maybe as a result of your PTSD, your shoulder hurts, or your brain gets fuzzy. Mm-hmm. And with guided imagery, we can go and just imagine removing the fuzz, taking the cobwebs out if that's what we see, or the cotton balls, and you'll start to get some clarity.
Yeah. I think that's an important point to make, Jane, that you to just touch upon that. Particularly men in the military, I think, have a tendency to not be good at talking, or not enjoy talking, right, about something. So talk therapy might not be the best solution for them, where your technique could be more beneficial. Is that, right? That's what you were saying.
Well, it can be, and it certainly can be a starting point for you, for anybody, with whether it's the military, because today is Veterans Day, or whether it's something from childhood. Taking the emotional component out of it does not remove the event, but it removes the triggers that turn the chemistry on that make you not able to function.
Right.
And so, and I'm pretty good at collaborative talking about things with people. I was born with the ability to do some of that. And what I found is it's not the same as coaching. I'm a trained coach too, it's really going at a way deeper level, so that you don't have to be labeled as not sufficient or something's the matter with you. You don't have to keep trying to cover it up. And certainly anybody who's a loved one of yours will notice when you're having an issue. Excuse me. So anyway, I just wanted to let people know today that there's hope out there for PTSD. I do work and have worked with several people with it. And there are tools that will help you start to be able to function again and not get triggered by the chemistry. You don't have control over that chemistry. You want to think you do, but you don't.
Right.
So
Yeah. Do you want to talk? I mean, we've got another couple of minutes to talk about your helping somebody with emotion code therapy, because it doesn't necessarily have to be PTSD. It could be any kind of trauma as well, right? You could have trauma from all kinds of situations, whether a car accident or some kind of abuse or what have you.
So when we have an embedded emotion, the situation has created shock in our system. So, and it embeds in us, and it might put the emotion of horror or terror into your system. I'm doing my coughing today.
Yeah, it's allergy.
We'll edit this out. So, but the whole concept, even though it seems pretty woo-woo, but Dr. Bradley Nelson, who created the emotion code, and he's written a book about it, so you can read about it for yourself. And this is something you could do for yourself, by the way. If you don't want to contact someone like me, and you're just determined, you can read his book and start doing some things. The easy thing about the emotion code, he's got 60 emotions. If you can intuitively, I use a pendulum, figure out which emotion you want to work with, then how you remove it is just 3 swipes over the top of your head. That's it. And it seems really simple and like, why would that work? But what's happened is the emotion you've identified and the event that you've identified gets pulled from your subconscious library. And once it's out of the library and your focus is on it, then it's up to be trashed. So the emotion went from the event, it's gone. The event is still there, but it's just like in your file drawer. And to some degree, the event may be just totally almost forgotten. So that's one of the pluses. I've had several things in my world. Thank you, Karen. I got water. So several things in my world that were pretty traumatic events, but I've removed emotions from them. So if people ask me, how many traumatic events have you had? I have to really think about it. And when I think about it, I go, oh my gosh, I've had quite a few, but they're running my show. They don't trigger chemistry.
Right.
So, yeah.
Awesome.
What else feels like we need to talk about here?
I mean, I think you've covered it, really. It's basically emotion code training or emotion code technique to deal with PTSD or traumatic effects that people might be having, and then how you can help them, really, right? Yep.
And besides the emotion code, I do tap into, it just reminded me there are like 3 parts to how I operate. Emotion code is like I use at the beginning a lot of times when somebody doesn't know, they just say, I'm a mess, I don't know where to start. Or because they don't really want to talk about it. But your higher self or the energies that work with you, whether you believe you have them or not, you do, will say, okay, well, let's start with emotion code. I'll start pulling out emotions that come to light.
Mm-hmm.
And then somewhere along the line, the other thing that happens to me, the second thing often, is I will get an underlying, I call it malware, sentence of a thought that is running your show, that's in your cells. And it could be, I don't deserve to get well,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm going to have PTSD for the rest of my life, or whatever.
Right.
And it life sucks. That's a good
Mm-hmm.
one.
Yep.
But when I hear in my head a thought process that you have, and then I verify with you, is this true for you? Because you might not have used those words in our conversation. And you go, absolutely. I said, what if that weren't true?
Mm-hmm.
And people look at me and say, well, it is. Thank you, Jay. It is. And I say, well, if it didn't turn any chemistry on, you didn't think that, it wasn't your go-to sentence, would you be open for me to try and remove it? And so most of the time, pretty much all the time, people say yes, but it's still true.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a technique as a medical intuitive where I can remove a thought process that's basically sitting in your cell, and who's ever running that cell gets the right thing, the trigger, turns on the chemistry, and you say, yep, life sucks. But if that event that you're having doesn't get the life sucks chemistry turned on, because that languaging is not, your malware is out.
Right.
The chemistry doesn't turn on, and it allows you to step forward. And if somebody's still a little bit stuck, maybe I check the word life sucks, and you say, well, I don't think it's really true, but my back's killing me and my shoulder's off, then that tells me energy is maybe stuck in your body, that from releasing. And then the third piece I do is guided imagery. So we will look in there and I'm pretty good at making stuff up, which seems to work. I don't understand it completely. It's quantum energy. But when we do that, all of that stuff that was stuck within you for that session gets to be released over a period of a few days. And you're lighter. Most people feel lighter after a session. They're usually pretty pooped, pretty exhausted, because they've lifted a load off. So I did want to say that besides emotion code, it's like 3 steps sometimes for people, and it didn't used to be. But doing the emotion code, and then if I get a thought process that we can remove, and then thirdly, if when that still feels stuck, it usually shows up physically. You're like your elbow hurts, or you're got a headache or anything, then I don't leave you with that. That's just releasing stuff, but I work with you to release it through some just guidance.
So if you anybody, if you think you need help or would like to talk to Jane, you can schedule an appointment with her on her through her website, janecphillips.com. You can give her a call or schedule a time to speak with her, and reach out to Jane if you have any questions. Thanks for joining us today.
Yep. Thanks for being here, everyone. Happy Veterans Day. Thank you to all the veterans and people in the military service who have brought us to where we are today.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.